Welcome back to the MedTech Trends podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Dorian. So today we have with us Michael Fergusson, who is joining us from, I believe, Vancouver, BC, and from a
Indeed.
company called Ayogo.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So a little bit of
Not
background.
Paris, but Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. I'm seeing it in the background. It's an awesome canvas there. So Michael is he's an entrepreneur, of course, and an innovator. And for the past 10 years, he's been working in digital health. He's got a very eclectic background as a game designer, musician, also software developer, and a martial artist. And he's a very renowned martial artist, I should add as well. He lives in Vancouver, BC, with his big, beautiful family. And he's particularly glad to be alive in this point in time. Lots of interesting things happening nowadays. I should also mention he's part of a number of board of directors, including the board of Innovate BC, which is a provincial crown agency, and the Electric Company Theatre, which is one of the world's most innovative companies. And in 2012, he was named Ernst & Young Social Entrepreneur of the Year, and he was named to Pharma Voice 100, which is a list of the 100 most inspiring people in life sciences. And he's also been a grand champion and a multi-gold medalist in the Western Canadian Martial Arts Championships. So, I mean, that is an eclectic background. Awesome to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us today, Michael.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Now, the company that you're a CEO of now, Ayogo,
Mhm.
if you go on the company website, which I will include a link in the description below, I think one of the first things people will notice is, well, I mean, the design is fantastic, so I can definitely appreciate that. But in addition, the company has won a number of awards, and I think by my count, probably something like at least a dozen. That includes company awards and also product-specific awards, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. So, I saw this and I thought to myself, it's been around, I believe, since about 2010 or so.
Yeah, 2011 actually.
2011. Okay. So a lot of awesome work has come out of the company, continues to come out of the company. So we'll get into that as well. But I'm wondering, all the awards and recognitions, how does that make you feel? You proud of the team, the company?
Well, I think it's really important to note that Ayogo doesn't do this work alone, right? I mean, there's a lot of really smart people here, really motivated, talented, engaged people doing important work in the world. But ultimately, we measure our success by our impact on the lives of individual patients. And, you know, to impact patients is to partner with clinicians. It's to partner with the healthcare organizations, the social service agencies, the healthcare authorities, the drug and device companies that we work with. So many of our awards are collective awards, right? They are awards for applications that, yes, we did the design and development, but we worked very closely with experts of various types in producing those applications. So it makes me feel like our team does good work, but also that we have been successful at partnering well and working with organizations that are similarly motivated, that share our mission to have a really positive impact in the world. At its base, our mission as a company is to ensure that all technology, all of our work with technology, but hopefully all technology is deployed in the interest of human flourishing first and foremost,
Mhm.
and to decrease suffering and to increase flourishing in the world. That is the point of technology. It's not to generate profit. It's not to win awards or flashy things. Those are just proxies. Those are proxies for the mission, and the mission is to make people's lives better.
Mhm. Yeah, that message definitely resonates with me. It's part of the reason why I wanted to create this podcast to begin with and have conversations with guests such as yourself and quite a few others. Really have this mission of kind of understanding that I guess the fundraising and the monetary aspect is really a means to an end, and that end is the bigger vision of what healthcare is sort of supposed to be about, which is getting people to thrive and getting back to their normal lives and having not having to worry about their health, and access is a big part of that, and innovative solutions to the current problems in healthcare, service delivery and accessibility and so on is a big part of that. And I think that's
Mhm.
part of what you guys are tackling.
Yeah, that's right. As I say, the only measure of success that matters in the end is human flourishing. You can have all the money, you can have all the awards, you can have all the everything, but the one thing that can't be missing from that picture is a real meaningful improvement in the lives of human beings. And I don't care what it is that you're doing. that has got to be the measure of our success as a society, as companies and as individuals working in the modern world.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, you're coming from a very eclectic background. From what I understood, your background is particularly focused on software development, and I think with a gaming application. And correct me if I'm off base there. But at some point, you decided, you know what, there's a significant challenge in the healthcare space, and a lot of these principles could be applied to let's say, behavior change for a lot of medical conditions, and there's a lot of benefit to doing that sort of thing. And then you kind of pivoted, I guess, into healthcare. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how that happened, and maybe it wasn't a single point in time when it happened, but how did you get involved in this space?
Yeah, well, I mean, you go through your life, everybody goes through their life, they have experiences, they follow their nose, they do what they think is right, what they think is interesting, what they think is fun, what they think is meaningful. Over time you collect a set of skills and capabilities, you identify talents that you have that you could develop, and so on. And those of us that are especially lucky do that and find ourselves at a point where we can deploy those things towards something that really matters. And I've had been in a very fortunate position. Partly it's so much of this is timing and luck, right? I was around in the first .com era, and I happened to not lose my shirt in that first round, and left that phase of our economy with resources to start new businesses. I'm not doing this work from the deck of my yacht or anything, but I was able to you know, do what I think every creative person really wishes they could do, which is to just follow their inspiration, at least for a while. And, I met lots of smart people. I went lots of interesting places. We did work with, all kinds of industries, myself and colleagues that I've started multiple companies with, where we found a real passion and a real opportunity to make a big impact was in healthcare. I mean, we looked at education, we looked at environmental issues. I mean, climate change is a huge issue, and there's work to be done there. People who have expertise in service design and cognitive psychology and software development, can do good work there. So, we could just easily have focused on those areas, but it just happened, again, by luck and coincidence, that we had, we're offered the opportunity to work on some very interesting projects, which had, you know, really interesting results, and that sort of builds a momentum of its own. So I don't want to claim that everything is by design here. Certainly, I mean, it's not that nothing is by design. We definitely made choices and wanted to be certain places, but a lot of it is just the opportunity that the universe decides to put in front of you at the moment, right? That I happen to know somebody who was the chairperson of a patient advocacy group in diabetes, and that I had, a contact with Joslin Diabetes Center at Harvard Medical School. That those were coincidences that allowed a particular project to come together at a particular time, and that we have a unique approach to trying to solve those sorts of problems of human behavior. I think gave us, some allowed us to come out of that project with some really, really interesting assets and perspective that we could use to ultimately build the company that became Ayogo.
Mhm. We'll definitely come back to some of the applications that you have, and I believe there's a certain way that you go about bringing on new partnerships and new clients and building out new products. And I think you have a suite of products which is fantastic and a lot of use cases. Um, I wanted to touch a little bit on the culture that you've built at Ayogo, because the company's been around for we're 21 now, so 10 years or so. And again, for anyone taking a look at the website, there's an obvious emphasis on not only building a technology, a digital health company, but also on building a certain culture.
Mhm.
And that's that much emphasis is not something that you see very often. Everyone kind of talks about it, but it's not always sort of that front and center. I wonder if you can touch on that a little bit. What was the reason behind so much focus on building the right kind of culture? And I suppose part of that has to do with, hiring the right people that you can really collaborate with in a way that makes these solutions come to life and benefiting a lot of people. But there's a cultural aspect to all that.
Sure. Well, Yeah, I think it's important to note that culture is not like a product that you make, right? It's an emergent property of a group of people. And culture emerges from the people that are there. And certainly you can guide it and you can nurture it in certain directions and in certain ways, but really it's up to the people to decide what their culture is going to be. And so partly it's about just the particular set of people that we started with had a focus. We wanted our entrepreneurial thesis to be that we do work that matters in the world. Work that we can care passionately about, work that we can recruit other people to care passionately about. And it is about the work, not about the projects, right? So any particular project could succeed or it could fail, but it's not going to, impact our way of thinking about the change we want to see in the world. And, in that way, I think we are resilient to the kinds of changes and pivots and challenges that a lot of small companies have. We can't raise the venture capital we want this quarter. That's okay. We're focused on the mission. We can't. Turns out that particular technological approach is not going to produce the result we want at a high enough level to be commercialized. That's okay because we're still focused on the mission. The mission is to collect a group of people dedicated to doing the very best work of their careers and directing that work to things that really matter, that are really going to change the world in positive ways, and to do it in an environment of positivity, right? Because certainly you can live with discomfort and unpleasantness for short periods of time if you're doing something really important. I have no doubt that being, a special forces um, soldier is really challenging and in many ways unpleasant experience, right? You are doing hard things in hard places, and you do that for short periods of time to achieve a really, really important result, but it's for relatively short periods of time. And you when you are working on something that is a multi-year project, it's really important to recognize the limits of human endurance there, right? Life is, I like to say, life is too short to not work on things that matter, but it's also too long to work with people you dislike. So we want to be together for a long time and do good work together. That means that we have to have fun. So we have this internal motto to our company, do our best work, change the world, laugh every day.
And that's also encapsulated in, I believe you guys call it the Ayogo Manifesto.
Yes.
Uh, and I took just an excerpt of that, and part of that reads, a company builds two things: its product and its culture. And it goes on to say that we believe that by doing this, Ayogo will create value for society and for individuals who come into contact with the company, including for shareholders who help to create it. So that positive mindset is definitely an important one for challenging times in particular. And it also sort of infiltrates, I think, the work that you're doing, the end product itself, because you can't. I mean, I'd imagine this kind of goes into the realm of psychology a little bit, but I imagine you can't build like a beautiful product that really means something and affects a lot of the end users, ultimately patients, in a positive way, unless you come from a positive place to begin with, right? We're not expecting like miserable people to build, fun games that are also extremely beneficial to people. So is that an
Well,
essential part?
I don't know if that last thing you said is quite true, right? I mean, I think that there are certainly miserable people working in miserable places under miserable circumstances that are producing good work. I've heard people say that some game companies are really hard to work at, and that they're challenging to be at, and there's a lot of politics and pressure and all that. I've heard that, um, and so clearly it's possible to do good work in environments like that, and maybe even look back on it and think, well, that was really wonderful work and I'm glad we did it. I just don't know how to do that. Right? I don't know how to do good work with miserable people. And I don't know how to sustain my focus and attention on things that I don't care about. And so, that's partly, I think we just all looked at each other and said, well, why would you not try hard to build a positive and nurturing and work environment. And I'll say one more thing, about that manifesto. I think a lot of people are surprised that there's so much language in it about ethics and morality, right? And what doing the right thing, and all of that, achieving positive outcomes for society and these sorts of things. They're like, well, you're a for-profit company. That's usually the kind of talk that we hear from nonprofits. Well, I think that for-profit companies have an extra responsibility, a higher responsibility and obligation to think these things, because the profit motive drives human behavior in a way that is morally neutral. It's important that you constrain your approach to capitalism with a focus on ethics and morality. Because profit motive can drive you to do things for profit that are not good for society, we need to think ahead in advance about how we're going to avoid doing that, how we're going to make sure that the work that we do is virtuous. It's clearly possible to build business models in healthcare that are really toxic, right? Patients, it is not, healthcare is not a market, and I don't care what anybody says, it is not a proper market between a patient and their physician. The physician has knowledge and information the patient could never have. So there's no symmetry. A good market has symmetry between buyers and sellers. And so you can't build business models that depend on asymmetry in that marketplace. That's unethical. And so that's the sort of thing you need to think carefully about, be aware of it when you see it so you can avoid it. The only way to avoid bad things happening is to, well, take action to avoid them. So that's what our manifesto is in part doing. It's saying, here are a bunch of things that we are not going to do. We're not going to make money for the sake of making money. We're not going to pick business models that could be hugely profitable but hurt somebody. And, yes, that will constrain the amount of profit we can make in pure dollars and cents terms. But we think that it creates a healthier society, and a healthier society ultimately is better for everybody. And so that's the world we want to live in.
Hmm. I wonder if that ever sort of comes into conflict, right? I mean, you've got the manifesto, which is very ethically focused, the company culture, which is very well aligned to that. And then as you've got potential partners in the pipeline, you're looking to and you've recently raised a little bit of money as well, and I imagine that a big chunk of that is going to go into just product development and building better products to benefit more people. But is there ever a bit of a conflict between the two where you have to make some kind of decision of, now we have to pick and choose which projects we're going to work on, because certain things are there's got to be a balance between the two. So some things might be more profitable, but they don't really align with our mission, vision, and ethos. And then other things are maybe less profitable, but they do align with it.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, so I guess, doesn't everybody do that all the time? I mean,
Yeah.
if you're maybe if you're starving, you just do what you have to do to survive, right? But how many of us are really in that circumstance? Sometimes it might feel like it, like, oh man, if I let my revenue decline by 10% this year, all these terrible things are going to happen, and so I need to start making unethical choices about how I'm purporting my revenues or which projects I'm going to take on. I mean, people always justify their bad behavior after the fact as being something that they really had to do. That is just obviously bullshit. And I think it's just really important to recognize that there are way worse things than not making more money this year than last year. There are way worse things than having a company that fails. There are way worse things than having to find a new job or to turn down a project, or you take reputational hits. I mean, there are way worse things than that. And it's just important to maintain context here. I think in some ways we're very fortunate that we work in healthcare, right? Because there's nothing to keep you humble like a sick child, right? And just, what problems do I really have here? That are more important for me to focus my attention on than to help this situation get better. And, it has a way of keeping us all humble here, I think, that, first of all, these are really important goals. Second of all, we can't do it by ourselves, right? We're not clinicians or therapists, and our products are not directly therapeutic. They're intended to be enhancements, right? Supports to the clinical relationships, the therapies that get delivered. So, in a certain way, we're like a drummer in a band, right? You're not the lead singer, you're not the guitar player, but you just got to be the best drummer you can be. You got to be a great accompanist. You got to make sure that everybody else can shine, right? I'm a drummer. And so I know that, you know, a drummer that everybody notices because they're trying to get out in front of the band and do solos all the time is just not a good drummer. It doesn't matter how skilled you are. You're just not doing your job right. But a drummer that enhances the music and enriches it and lets the singer sing and lets the guitar player play, that is a great, great drummer. And that's the kind of relationship we want to have to our partners. We're the side man. The nurse is delivering the care, and our software is there to enable her to do it. It's not there to win awards or to take the spotlight or anything.
Gotcha. I love that analogy too. It's an awesome one. Okay, so I wanted there's definitely a couple of use cases that I wanted to get into because again, I think there's a lot of really really great stuff happening at Ayogo now, and I imagine in the future as well. Before that, again, you're coming from a very strong sort of software development and kind of gaming environment, and a big part of the I guess the approach that Ayoga takes, looking at it sort of overall, is the idea of gamification. Now, it's not my immediate background, so I read a little bit into this preparing for this interview, but I wonder if you can kind of describe it a little bit. What was the rationale behind using gamification principles, and how does that really work within the context of healthcare?
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
It's broad, I know, but
no, it's a good question, and I'll just start with this one idea that I want you to hold in mind, right? That in general, what people say when they mean gamification is complete bullshit, right? Most people who talk about gamification have never designed a game and have no idea what they're talking about. So when you say so, for example, I'll often hear people say, yes, our system is gamified. We give people rewards and things, right? People will get rewards and trophies and stuff, right? That's gamification. Well, getting paid for doing things is not play, right? That's work. You just made your application somebody's job when you pay them to do it, and you make their motivation the extrinsic motivation of being paid. People play games because they're intrinsically motivated, right? It is a emergent behavior, right? Animals play, and they're not getting paid, right? And so what is a game really? And I think that we have stopped using the term gamification in our business largely because of this problem. I think that people don't really understand it very well. They don't have a good definition for it, and it's come to mean something that makes no sense sort of etymologically in the word, right? A game is an environment in which a human being, or somebody else or an animal, but a human being can express some kind of survival behavior, typically in an environment where you're not likely to die, right? And so you can do things that are analogs of real world behavior, that is necessary, real world necessary survival behavior. You can break it down, pick pieces of it out, and reassemble them into environments that still give you the satisfaction of having expressed a survival behavior successfully, but the risk is much lower. So the really good example I like is hide and seek. Everybody plays hide and seek, right? You instinctively play hide and seek with babies in the crib, the object permanence game of hiding your eyes and peekaboo. I mean, it's one of the very first games we play, and we play it all the way through our lives to like very, very complicated systems like war games, right? Are a kind of hide and seek, right? So what's really going on there, right? In order, just imagine this, right? You're a proto-human on the African savannah, right? And the most important thing that you can do is hide from a predator and seek prey. Those are like the two key tasks that you have. You got to not get eaten, and you got to find things to eat, right? And how do you get good at it? You don't want to get good at it in a production environment, right? Especially you don't want to teach your children, your little baby humans, to hide from wolves by putting them together with wolves. You need some way to practice hiding against a predator that won't kill you. So we use the other kids as stand-ins for the predator, and we create this artificial environment of hiding and seeking to learn the most critical survival behavior of all: how to hide from a predator to seek prey. And that's why it's so fundamental as a game, and builds and has so many echoes in all the other kinds of games that we play, is because it is so fundamental, right? And you think about Candy Crush. Well, that's a pattern matching game. How do you choose the mushrooms that are good for food from the mushrooms that will kill you? Well, you have to be able to recognize patterns and you have to be able to do that, right? And so, well, Candy Crush is not going to poison you, right? But it allows you to practice what is an important survival skill, right? And do it in an environment where you're not likely to die. So this is what's going on with games, right? It's not like gamification is not the process of taking stuff that was designed just to be entertaining and pulling it into an environment where important things happen. It's more like the opposite. It's more like we are understanding what are the fundamental human behaviors that we want someone to express in our environment and put the design patterns there that will allow them to experience those behaviors, to exhibit those behaviors and experience some positive feedback, ideally intrinsically valuable feedback. So not paying people for things, but getting people to feel good in themselves because they did something that they already wanted to do or already felt they needed to do. So that's what gamification, I think, is really, and that's what it means to us. And so in that sense, these design patterns are not about just like plugging rewards and things. I like to say points and badges and achievements are to games, which what page numbers and chapter headings are to literature. They're not the actual book, right? They're a story being told about the book. It has these chapters. It has these many pages, right? A game has points, right? Ms. Pac-Man has points. I tell you, my high score in Ms. Pac-Man is 385,211. That might not mean anything to you at all if you don't play Ms. Pac-Man, but if you do, it will mean something to you. It means that I have not mastered the fifth screen. If that's my high score, I must not have mastered the fifth screen. And that the points are actually a language that talks about the game, right? About my achievement in the game and my skill acquisition and my mastery. That's why the points matter, is because they're a language that talks to you about what's going on in the game. Is a game that the score is 7-2, is that good or bad or indifferent? If it's a basketball game, it's terrible. If it's a hockey game, there was a ton of scoring, right? And so it matters what the game is. The points don't matter. They're just a language about the game. If you don't know what the game is, the points can't mean anything. So when you put points on something without somebody understanding what it's saying about the underlying system, you're not gamifying it. You're just layering some arbitrary counting system on top. If it is actually expressing the underlying expertise and mastery that you want the person to achieve, if that's what you're looking for in your environment, then it can be a good technique to provide feedback. But the points themselves don't provide the value. It is what the points represent that provides the value. So those underlying game mechanics need to be in place so that you can express them in points. And so, yeah, we try to help people understand what those underlying mechanics are and apply them in a bunch of different ways. Mechanics related to agency and decision making, discovery and exploration of spaces, uncertainty and surprise and delight, and conflict and challenges, and the progression of challenges, and how that relates to the acquisition of skills and how they need to move together. You can't make the system too hard too fast, or people get frustrated. You can't keep it too easy for too long, or they'll get bored, right? And then, of course, at the end, you have this language of outcomes that you express back to them so they have a sense of what just happened to them and why it should matter.
A lot of really interesting points in that. Part of my background is also psychology, so I'm sort of familiar with the language, just not
Mm,
in the frame of an actual formal kind of game, and how that can apply to healthcare. But there's another point that I've heard you talk about in I think at least one other interview. It's the idea that people are motivated by challenges. So you can't make
mm.
something that is too easy, and you can't make something that is just I don't know, like reading a page of text where there's no feedback, there's nothing there, there's no incentive. There has to be some sort of challenge in any kind of application that you're developing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a generalization, but I think it's generally true. I mean, I'm not very good at impressions, but we will go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Right? Why
uh,
would we go to the moon if it was easy? There'd be no
right.
point. We went because it was hard, because we had to learn things, because we had to challenge ourselves, because we had to, extend ourselves, right? Why do I play why do I play soccer? I play soccer with my friends. I'm in the Metro League here in Vancouver. Why do we do it? We don't do it because it's easy. There's lots of games I could play that are easier than soccer. I could play tic-tac-toe or whatever. But we do it because it's hard, because it's challenging, because there are opportunities to fail, opportunities to get more skilled and to improve over time. That's one of the things that really motivates people find really motivating. And so this, I call it the ease of use trap. You make an application, you're like, well, we want it to be really easy to use. Do you though? Right? I mean, so easy to use to initially start using it, but very quickly your brain will start to identify things in your environment that are safe to ignore. And the things that are safe to ignore are the things that are easy or trivial or don't take very much attention to get done. And once something becomes safe to ignore, like a digital health application, it's very hard to get their attention and get them to start engaging with you again. Engagement tails off. Six Sigma High's got a great sort of flow in his book Flow. He wrote up this great flow diagram, what we call the flow channel, and it's really important in game design, right? You think about, how you're playing Pac-Man or whatever, and or pick your game, and it gets more challenging over time. Well, your skill, what it's trying to do is it's trying to move your skill up together in lockstep with the challenge, so that at each increment in challenge, it's at first hard, very, very hard, and then it gets easier and easier, and then they give you a new increment of challenge so that they stay kind of in lockstep. Because if you make the difficulty increase too quickly, for the person's skill acquisition, they'll become very frustrated. I can't win this game. I can't finish this level. Why am I even doing this? I don't understand how these medications work. It's too much information. They get frustrated and they give up. Or you make it too easy for too long, you have the opposite effect. It's boring and becomes easy to ignore. And how many apps we have on our phone that once we figured out how they worked, we stopped paying any attention to them. They didn't get more challenging over time. And so there was just no point to re-engaging. I already figured that out. I already figured out how Fitbit works. I walk, I get bang, I get numbers. Now that I figured it out, what's motivating me, right? It's not the Fitbit anymore. It's got to be something else. It's got to be the challenge of walking farther and the things. So that's why, all these wearables come with applications and communities to create the challenge and motivation that keeps people engaged.
I've heard my professors from undergrad. I think the way that they said his name was High. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's probably different pronunciations, but yeah, the concept of flow,
That's behind now.
the guy that was developing the concept of flow, really interesting and extremely important now too. And it's interesting. We're talking in the context of digital therapeutics and apps. Um, there are literally thousands of these apps available out there. Like it's overwhelming. There are literally too many of them, and a lot of them do a lot of very similar things. So there's got to be some sort of systematic way of building them so that they're actually useful and people really use them intentionally. I imagine part of that comes with having a great app, but also great partnerships and getting people involved. A lot of stakeholders. You want to have your physicians involved in a process, your other caretakers, your family members, and so on. So just to give everyone a little bit of a sense of the breadth and depth, if you will, of how broad these concepts can go in the context of healthcare. So Yogo's done projects with, for example, with Merck on sleep therapy. You've worked with, as you mentioned, Jocelyn Diabetes Center, which is a major center. So obviously diabetes has quite a few applications. You've also worked with J&J, I believe, in the nurse family partnership to provide support for first-time low-income
Well,
mothers.
we didn't work directly with J&J. They were very excited about our projects and and wrote an analysis of it. But
Okay.
and we're glad for their attention, and we really respect what they do with pregnant and nursing moms. I think they do great work, and glad that they gave us the attention. Our partner over there was the Nurse Family Partnership.
Okay, gotcha. Appreciate the correction. You've also worked with the Digital Health Circle
Mhm.
in an MS project,
Yes.
and I think more recently as well with Baxter on a home dialysis application as well.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is a lot of different therapy areas. Obviously, a lot of awesome work can come out of applying these principles. I wonder if there's one application in particular that stands out and if we can go into exactly how that application works and if there's any sort of reference frame for the outcomes, the number of people that were using it and sort of how they benefited from it.
Yeah. Well, I think, one important thing to say about our business is that we are actually kind of narrowing our focus over time. So we started our business kind of in a consulting and professional services frame of mind, right? So it was, we've got a bunch of skills. We're going to find people who have, you know, work to do that's really interesting and who are willing to pay us to help them do that work. And our thinking always, our entrepreneurial thesis always was that over time, we would identify product opportunities. We wanted to be a product company ultimately, rather than a kind of professional services company. So, as we've accumulated expertise and intellectual property and software over the course of the last 10 years, we've been building out a framework platform for us to build and narrowing our focus in clinical areas. So where we are primarily focused as a business these days, although we still do some professional services work, and we have a lot of really interesting projects that come to us that way, and we want to keep doing them because it's good work and because our employees consider it to be valuable to them and their careers and how they think about their work, to have some variety. So, that's not just that I'm naming these areas, I mean, it's the only areas we work in, but we're doing the majority of our work these days in two areas. One is renal care, and where we have a good long-term partnership with Baxter that we're very pleased about. And renal care is an area that we're really interested in. There's some really alarming statistics there. In the United States, 65% of patients in late stage kidney disease have an unplanned or crash start on dialysis. So they don't start dialysis in a controlled way. It's not integrated well into their life. And there's a lot of treatment failures that result in that first year after starting on dialysis, not to mention that it appears that some significant number of those patients end up on a form of dialysis that doesn't match their needs very well. And because patients who have a crash or unplanned start are 95% likely to end up on in-center hemodialysis, but patients who have planned and controlled starts end up on home dialysis almost 5 times as often. So we know that patients aren't getting everything they want out of that transition. It's not good for the clinicians because, of course, clinicians want patients to be successful, and it's not good for the healthcare system because, well, there's real costs to switching therapies or having patients on the wrong therapy. So that represents a kind of challenge we really love. We want to help those patients get where they want to go. We like the fact that everybody's interests are well aligned among all the various parties that we work with, and we love that one a lot. We are working with Nurse Family Partnership in maternal care and early childhood development. We are currently deployed with them in 17 states with nearly 5,000 moms and about 1,800 nurses. Our goal there is to reach 50,000 moms annually served. That's Nurse Family Partnership's goal, and our goal is to support them in achieving that objective, to help the nurses be more effective, to make their work life more more focused on patient care and less focused on administrative overhead and these kinds of things. We think that we found a way to use technology to enhance the nurse-client relationship rather than replace it. So we love everything about that too, and that represents a whole category of customers for us that we're working with a whole range of social service agencies and organizations. We call that part of the business the social enterprise part of our business, and we have a number of customers there with whom we are building next gen clinician coaching tools for them to work with largely underserved communities and populations. But it's a set of techniques and systems features that we think are broadly applicable in healthcare, where the patient needs some support and coaching to achieve an objective, and much of the work needs to be done away from the point of care. And often there's not a very good connection there between what the patient does in their life and what happens at the point of care. They're two very different environments. They seem very alien to each other, and often patients struggle to connect and learn what they need to learn and be engaged in the clinical environment because it's so alien to them. And that leads to them not carrying the assets and knowledge and tools that they need into their life to be successful there. So what our tools do is create a connection, some connective tissue between those two environments to make the coach and clinician and their instructions and guidance more present in the patient's life when they're away from the point of care, but also feed back real information back into the clinical environment so that clinicians aren't always starting from scratch. Every time they see a patient for the first time, they have some information about the patient's goals and values and objectives and progress.
Okay. Really good to hear about that. And one of the things that's crossing my mind is the company has also a longstanding focus on the topic of compliance. Um,
Mm.
and there's a lot that needs to be done on maintaining compliance or enhancing compliance in a variety of therapy areas. Lots of different aspects of healthcare could benefit from that. I understand where that fits into, let's say, the renal care space.
Mm.
And actually, for a lot of patients, they have to go daily, I believe, and you can't really miss that because your health can really spiral downhill very fast if you miss a dialysis appointment. I wonder if
Depends
you
on the
can
form
speak
of dialysis, but yeah.
exactly, yeah, it's a very important area, and a lot of people go on dialysis. The stats are pretty shocking, actually. Um, I wonder if you can touch on that a little bit. The concept of compliance. How did the applications that you're working on sort of enhance compliance?
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's a lot that hides inside that word compliance, right? And you know, there are things that people need to do, right? There are outcomes that people want to achieve, and there are steps that are necessary to achieve those objectives. Sometimes those are the only steps, right? There's only one path. Sometimes there are actually multiple different ways to get to that same destination. So a big part of compliance is actually understanding what will work for that particular person, right? Nobody, no patient well, I mean, I say never, but nobody really goes into a circumstance, healthcare circumstance thinking, I want a suboptimal outcome here, right? Everybody wants the best outcome. They are not compliant with the steps they're given, either because they don't believe those steps will actually lead to the result they want, they don't understand the steps, or they don't understand the relationship between the steps and the outcome, right? A lot of patients, for example, don't understand the difference between, you know, a medication that must be taken every day at a certain time. And if you miss a dose, you do not take a double dose later. It has to be taken at that time. And medications where you have to keep a certain amount of it in your body at all times. So if you miss a dose, you must take a new dose. Well, there's a huge difference between those two things. And if you don't fully understand it, it can be frustrating and intimidating and even terrifying for a patient. So a lot of it is about raising the level of sort of patient's own empowerment, their knowledge and their understanding and their sense of control over what they're doing. Often that's referred to as perceived self-efficacy. Do I believe that I can actually do the things that are necessary to get to the end result I want? Do I understand what the steps need to be taken? Do I believe that they will work? And do I think I can truly achieve it and get the result that I want? A lot of the gaps are in that sort of patient understanding, right? There was a great study by a researcher named Meeker that found, and it's widely quoted, I think, and when we talk about social determinants of health, right, that 10% of the outcome is due to related to clinical factors, and 90% is related to social determinants, psychosocial determinants of health. And but so much of our healthcare system is just really focused on these clinical aspects. This is the medication that I'm giving you. I've chosen this one because I think it's best for you, and you take it, right? And there's very little room in that for a patient to, see their own preferences and values reflected. A good clinicians don't do that, right? We know that good clinicians listen, they think carefully about the patients, they assess what they think the patients need, and they respond to it. Well, it's challenging to do. That's a skill, and there's an increasing number of instruments that we can apply to measure things like perceived self-efficacy or depression, which can have a really significant impact on a person's engagement in their own care, or social connectivity, because we know that people who see reinforcement in their social environment for the things they've learned learn better. So social reinforcement, social patterning, and social reinforcement of learning are important things. None of those can really be done sitting exactly at the point of care, right? Either because the clinician doesn't have time, or because, well, you just don't really have a social network sitting in the waiting room of a clinic. So these are opportunities for us to provide digital interventions, digital extensions, you might say, of the core intervention to help the patient integrate the new behavior into their life. So understand what it is, integrate it into their life, see the results of it, get that feedback that says that they are doing the right thing, which is often missing. Often when you take a medication and you do the right thing, literally nothing happens. That's in fact the whole point, is that nothing happens, but our brains don't respond very well to nothing as feedback, right? You want to give some feedback. So we can actually create systems that give them feedback, provide a language back to them, as I was saying earlier about gamification, right? Provide a language back to them that expresses their underlying values. We are helping you get to your health goal. Here is the evidence that you are taking the necessary steps. You may not be able to tell because you don't feel any different right now, but it's very important that you understand that it is working. The right things are happening and you're doing the right things. So, that's kind of where our software sits, right? Is in this connective tissue between the clinical environment and this, so you might say the real world, where patients actually live their lives and really and where health really lives, and not in a hospital, but in a person's home. That's where health lives, and we want to extend this power and talent and knowledge and understanding and all this motivation of all these clinicians who really want to do the right thing but can't reach the patients where they live. They have to bring the patients in. Well, we can actually help bridge that gap.
Again, really interesting you mentioned that. I got a little bit of a sense of that also again from the website where you're talking about tackling health problems in a greater context. That context is outside of the immediate problem of the health issue, but what's involved in a person's everyday life,
Mhm.
the healthcare system, and broader and beyond that. So, really interesting stuff that you're talking about. Michael, I wish we had a lot more time today. I could probably go on for a couple hours. I'd love to pick your brain on a few more topics. I'm thinking maybe for the last couple minutes as we wrap up. I'm sure there's a lot of really interesting things happening at Ayogo right now. Possibly some things are in the pipeline in the works. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to. So you mentioned some of the two main therapy areas that you're working in, focusing on, I guess, going forward. Um, how do you go about bringing new clients on? And is there anybody that you're looking to bring on or to partner with or are currently working with, and that you haven't quite gone around to kind of announcing, but there's something interesting that you're working on right now?
Well, I mean, I talked a little bit about our work in the social enterprise space. We're very excited about this work. We're reaching out now to, agencies and, um, you know, um, organizations that provide coaching-based programs to underserved populations. We think we've got a product that can really help, and we're excited about partnering to deploy it broadly. There's a lot, these underserved populations, you know, just in the word underserved gives you a sense of kind of what the challenge is there, right? Is actually reaching them, finding them, and then treating them with dignity and giving them the level of service that people deserve and need in order to be successful. I mean, it's not charity; it's doing the right thing. It's good for all of society, right? And so we have a really exciting opportunity there. So we're keen to talk to any organizations that have a focus like that, and of course we're doing a lot of hiring at the moment. Designers, developers, strategists. Those kinds of skill sets are always in short supply in general, and so we're always hungry to meet talented people who want to do their best work, change the world, and laugh every day.
Mhm. And I believe, and this might be my last question because I know we're running out of time. I believe in 2020 you brought in a strategic partner, strategic and financial partner. I'm wondering if, and we might post a link to an article about that. Really interesting stuff. Is a lot of that going into product development, technology building, hiring? How do you envision that to work out?
Yeah, it is about building our technology and product platform and scaling it. Some of that scaling, requires people. Some of that scaling requires, acquisition of technologies and, business development. And, we're building the business and we're scaling our organization to have a greater impact in the world. That's why we raise the money. We're very fortunate to have investors that share that mission with us. And it's exciting times to be us. That's for sure.
All right, Michael, it's been a pleasure. Again, I wish we could continue this for a little while longer, but time is short, and it's an interesting time, especially with COVID. A lot of people need this sort of thing, this sort of help. So,
Yeah,
I look forward to a lot more interesting things coming out of Ayogo. Again, I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to potentially having you come back on as more things happen with Ayogo.
that's great. Thanks. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the great questions.
Thanks so much, Michael. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.